All right, let's get started. All right, it's the team and me and Danielle and Oliver. All right. So, Danielle, is this your first workshop? Then you're muted. Can you hear me okay? Give me a thumbs.
It's our
Yeah.
second workshop, I think.
Second. Can you hear me okay? Should I get the mic?
Yeah, no, I can hear you perfect.
Okay, good. All right. So what we're going to be, I'm going to give you a little background about how I got introduced to all about the primitive reflexes. So I was a preemie. I was 3 months. Yeah, hold on. Hey guys, would you sit down, or it's just distracting if you're moving around and you're doing stuff back there. Oh, and there's a sheet right there, a white sheet with black writing with big. See it? Yeah, hold on 1 second. Okay, so welcome workshop, and what I like to do is just kind of introduce to you how I got introduced to the subject. So when I was first training to learn how to become a pediatric chiropractor, one of the courses was on sensory integration. And I was about 50 years old then, so this is about 17 years ago. And I'm sitting in the class, and the teacher, her name was Monica Brugger, her name's still Monica Brugger, was teaching us about sensory issues, which I'd never heard about. And all of a sudden, here I am, 50 years old, and I just start crying in the middle of the class. Of course, all of a sudden, she started talking about me. and myself, I always felt a little different. And when she described certain things, I just realized, well, this is what I've been dealing with my whole life. And I had no idea what it was. And it was a tremendous relief in a way, to all of a sudden like be named, right? And she saw that, and we ended up going to lunch. She says, this always happens. This happens all the time. And she said, would you mind if I use you as a subject to do all these tests that I'm going to be teaching, all the other doctors, and they're on primitive reflexes, right? And I said, sure, no problem. And she did all these tests on me, and I was positive for all of them. And, as a kid, I was kind of like an awkward kid. I was in, I was like very sensitive. I was like, my head was in the clouds. I was a horrible team athlete, and I couldn't play sports well, I was one of those kids. Anyway, so let me explain what these primitive reflexes are. Right? So we have these inborn reflexes that we have in infants, and almost all of them develop in utero. And they're our survival for when we're born. So just how the baby knows how to turn their head a certain way to come out of the birth canal, and how a baby holds on to their mother, right? How they grasp, right? Or how they start picking their head up, or how they know how to nurse, or rude. All these things are just these reflexes that are inborn inside of all of us. Now, the thing is, these reflexes should be integrated into the rest of the system, into our systems. And we shouldn't have them anymore at certain ages. Different ones you lose at different points in your life before you're a year old. Right? What happens sometimes when there's a lot of stress, and let's say for me, I was 3 months premature. I was in incubators for 6 weeks, all right? And in those days, when you're incubated, you're totally isolated. And for all the mothers out there, we know how much our babies need to be held and touched. So for 6 weeks, I was all by, I was alone. So I was born pretty stressed out. And I've stayed like that a good part of my life. And so that stress, when the child has experienced that stress, often, many different reasons, they do not integrate these primitive reflexes. Now, when you don't integrate them, all right, this leads to developmental problems later, and often a lot of sensory issues. And a lot of kids with the ADHD and kids on the spectrum and just kind of kids with a lot of anxiety have these. I'm just going to turn this. A lot of kids are still holding onto these primitive reflexes. And what I want to teach everybody who's on this line today is different exercises that you could do now with your baby that will help them integrate these reflexes. Right? And we're going to go through them, and I'm going to show you. I'm going to use this little teddy bear as the baby, and these are exercises that you could be doing with your child every day. Right? And some of the things that you'd be doing are just like regular things that you do with a baby. All right. So one reflex, the first one we're going to start with is called the ATNR. Okay, and this one thing is when a baby, if you turn their head, they'll point in that direction, put their arms up like that. Right, and that's called the fencer stance. Okay, and that's a healthy ATNR. What'll happen if somebody retains that once they get older? There's different tests that we do, which could be a whole other workshop because we're talking about babies today. But the tests that we could do to see if they had retained that particular reflex. But what we could do to help with that, all right, to help us integrate that reflex is tracking, visual tracking. So when the baby is on their back, just make sure, like every day, do things where they're following. You have toys or something that they're going to look at, and just go in all different fields so their eyes are looking at these things in all directions. Right? Simple, right? Not a big thing. Also, I'm going to give you guys the name of a YouTube, a group of occupational therapists that have great YouTubes. That give you these exercises as well. Now the next one is called the Palmer grasp, and that's the one where the babies grab onto you. All right. So one thing you could do is when they do that, is you could kind of move your fingers and stimulate their palms. All right. But what's a very good thing to do is that once they start crawling, right, you have to make sure that their hands are open and their palms are flat on the floor, so they could feel the ground on their palms. Okay, and it's good if they could do that on different textures, so they experience different textures while they're doing this. Simple, right? No big deal. but you gotta make sure the baby's not crawling, you know, with their palms closed. The next one is the STNR, all right? And that actually develops at about that starts at 6 months when the babies start to crawl. So that is so important. A lot of people, they're so excited. Oh, my kid didn't crawl at all. They start walking right away. There's so many things neurologically that happen. So many things that happen neurologically from crawling that could really affect their development. In fact, dyslexia is linked to babies who usually don't crawl. All right. So you got to really stimulate that. You get down on the floor with them. You have toys. You could build tunnels so they crawl through tunnels. Anything to get them going. It's so important. Don't allow them to start walking before they start crawling, and you want them crawling a lot. All right. The next one is called the Moro, which is the startle. You know, like when someone scares you. Whoop. Okay. This is a very important one to make sure that this is integrated. Actually, I know my wife definitely still has a startle reflex like that. If you walk into a room and she doesn't realize you're there, and go hi, she'll like jump 10 feet up. You probably have that too, Ken. Right? Yeah. All right. It's a lot of anxiety when you retain that. That's the thing is that a lot of these reflexes, when you retain them, they cause a lot of anxiety, a lot of stress on the whole nervous system. So what we do with the Moro, okay, it's a couple of things. One is if you have a yoga ball, and you should get one actually, just for this, and you roll the baby on their back, back and forth, back, front, and once they're able to sit, do it while they're sitting. This is going to help their balance too, understand? Oh, and we're going to talk about that also, about baby carrying. All right, so that's the Moro on a ball, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. All right. The next one is the Galant. Okay. A lot of times when kids retain the Galant, they become bedwetters. So you don't want that to happen. So what we do is that's actually tactile on the back. So you get them on their backs and you get them moving around. All right. You could also like kind of keep tickling their backs right by the spine. All right. But a lot of activities on the back. So they're just looking and grabbing and doing things. So they're moving that way. And they have to be flat on their back, crossing stomach. Same thing. All right. The other thing you could do is snow angels with them. So they're on their back and you stimulate like a snow angel. So you do their hands, their arms, and their feet. And that will help with the spinal Galant. Okay. Now, the next one is the TLR, and that's something that you just do tummy time. Right. The Landau is something that when you see your baby laying on their belly and they kind of look like they're swimming, it looks a little weird, but let them do that. They're actually integrating that Landau when they're doing that. And the next one is the suck or rooting. Okay. What's interesting that a lot of times when people retain this, they kind of become orally fixated. You know, they're always chewing on stuff. And actually, my kids like that. We're going to talk about my son in a minute. Right? But it also, for some interesting reason, is it affects handwriting and hand skills. That there's some connection between the mouth and the hands. Right? So somebody with like bad handwriting often will have a rooting reflex. Yeah, I was just thinking we should do a test on it. We're going to do a test on Christina. You would think this woman would have the most beautiful handwriting in the world, the way she is with everything. And then I look at the handwriting, it's like my friend Paul Greenberg's from third grade.
That's always
Yeah, I bet we'll do some tests on you. All right, see. All right. Another thing that's really important for all of these is baby carrying. You don't want your baby sitting in a car seat like this all day. You don't want them in a stroller all the time. Just the movement, being close to you and being moving with you, with as you're doing things, makes a huge difference for the health of that nervous system. All right. I'm going to talk a little about the different sensory issues that this will lead to. So the main one we're going to talk about is called proprioception. And proprioception is where you are when you're in space, like where realizing where you are in space. I'm sorry. So that's why, like when people are drunk, it ruins their proprioception, and that's why they can't touch their nose with their eyes closed because they don't know where their nose is. But what it also does, it gives you a real sense of being unrooted, like not grounded. Right? And this is something that you see with a lot of kids with ADD and ADHD on the spectrum. And how it's been described to me, I don't know if anybody has ever jumped off a high diving board, but you do that. Some people, I do that. I'll stim. And what kids on the spectrum will do when they're going like this grounds them so they could feel their body. That's where they do that. Right? So they're always having the sensation as if they're jumping off a high diving board. That's how it feels like to be in the spectrum. Some of these kids. Right? But you could imagine if you don't have a sense of where you're in space, how much anxiety that produces. And a lot of people who have that proprioception issues can't stop moving. They're always doing things because it makes them feel grounded. They're doing this and that, this and that. They can't just sit down and just relax. The other sensory issues, tactile. You have kids who can't stand the tags in their shirts or the socks, or like auditory. I can't stand like loud music. Music bothers me most of the time, except for at work, I guess, because I'm moving.
When my niece was little and you put socks on her, if we had seams, she would stand there and go, seams, seams,
Yeah,
seams. She
yeah.
couldn't stand
It's all sensory stuff. The oral, when they have stuff with taste, they could only eat certain foods. Right? It's just all those things, all the senses. But the proprioception is one that I want to talk about. So my son Heath, when he was about 2 or 3, one of the things you'll see with kids who have problems with proprioception is that when they walk down the steps, they only do it one step at a time. They can't just walk down steps. And when you see a kid do that, immediately the kid got proprioception issues. Right? And then they can't play sports. They can't do all. They get overwhelmed with everything because they don't feel secure with where they are. So when my son was about 3 years old, lo and behold, chip off the old block, it became very clear that he had these issues. And when we brought him to kindergarten, he was actually classified as having these sensory integration issues. And the poor kid was a mess. He was obese. All right. He was obese. He would just cry at the drop of the hat. Everything overwhelmed him. He just was like, he just wasn't functioning well at all. Right. Now, this is about the time when I started studying all this. And one of my mentors was telling the story exactly about how his kid was like this. And this is what pushed him to become a pediatric chiropractor and to learn all this stuff. And now his kid was the captain of his rugby team at his university. This is in England. So he was actually able to produce all this change and really help this kid. So You know, my son now is one of the youngest ski patrolmen on the East Coast. He's a star soccer player, starting varsity lacrosse player. He's like he's one of the he's one of the best athletes in New Paltz, and it's great. He's just an incredible freaking athlete, and grounded,
And not obese.
and not he's like what do they call it, Adonis, tall, good-looking, handsome, athletic kid. It's amazing, and a lot of it is all the work, because we were able to see this and we did all this work with him, which really helped. But what really actually, I believe, saved him was skiing. Because the movement of skiing probably worked. We started him skiing when he was 3 years old, and just that movement of the skiing, that's when we really start to see things change with him. That it shifted something in his nervous system. He's probably one of the he's ski patrolman at Bromley Mountain at 16 years old. He's probably one of the best skiers of all the ski patrolmen, of all these adult people who ski for 50 years. So just to see that change is possible is just. And for myself, once I started realizing what my story was, and I've done things for that too, I've been able to calm down. So anyway, Danielle, I think you're the only one who's live on Zoom, doing these exercises really, along with the chiropractic. And let's not forget that the chiropractic calms their nervous system like hugely. Right? So doing those exercises along with the chiropractic can really change your child's life and trajectory of mental development. And people who are watching this on Zoom, on YouTube, take this seriously. It will make a huge difference. Oh, and the name, if you put down on YouTube, because these women just explain it fantastic. They have a bunch of videos. They're occupational therapists, and it's called Harika, Harika. That's the name of their group. And most of this workshop was taken from their primitive reflex integration in infants video. And if you're interested, just ask me if you didn't get that. It's Harika. Primitive reflex integration. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Danielle. I hope you got something from this.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks. And anybody watching the recording, thank you. Thanks so much. Bye.